And they're better at introducing themselves than I am, so I could speak from a daughter's perspective, but I'll let them go ahead and share a little bit about themselves as we get started.
Good evening. I feel like we're gonna have, I guess I'm gonna hold on to the mic until I think that you all can hear me without it, because I'm better without it. But, ah, somebody stay there. I am, I'm gonna take you all back. It's gonna be a little bit of a comedy routine here, too. So, we have some folks who have been married longer than us and who understand how this goes. So I'm going to take a little bit of liberty. Well, I'm going to do this quick so that you can do yours. Then we can talk a little bit about background.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm Eldris Campbell, also known as Mama Jackie. Mama Jackie down here, but where I'm from, or where I transitioned from, is Rochester, New York, and I'm known in Rochester, New York as Eldris or Eldris Campbell. I will say that Eldris is a title, and it is a title that was conferred on me by people in my community, but I'll speak to one gentleman who I refer to as like my brother from another mother, and his name is Elder Ross. He's a Rastafarian, and he said that Eldris is a combination of the terms elder and empress. And Rastafarian is like empress. Well, as soon as I heard that, I kind of straightened up my back a little bit and said, that's right, that fits me. So I stepped into that, and I stepped into that when I was about 60 years old. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that a little later. I got more, but you know.
Elder.
Elder versus Eldris.
Okay.
Go.
Amen.
I'm going to address the elders in the room and ask for permission to speak. Thank you. I'm Michael Campbell, and most people refer to me as Baba Mike. I am an elder, and I do fit in that role as an elder. My background is also from Rochester, New York. I might add, I was a native Rochesterian. I was born and raised there. So while I agreed that we should leave those cold environs, I was a child that played in the snow daily. I loved the snow when I was a child. I loved it. I'm glad to be here with you all tonight. I think what we've created is something useful for our community. And as a parent of 6 children, our blended family, we have 6 altogether, I would have loved to have had a manual or anything talking about being a successful black parent. I think it's very timely. I think it's very useful. And we've had a lot of fun working with the parents that we've met on this journey as well. Is that enough? Okay.
Awesome. So thank you for that. And you guys both alluded to it briefly, but you are originally from Rochester, New York, so am I, born and raised. And this work sort of originated in that community, right? And was born of this desire to have a more concrete African-centered foundation for the family unit. And I'm familiar with some of the work that led you guys up to this, but folks here might not be. So can you talk a little bit about the very beginning, the seed that was planted that ultimately led to this fruit that we call this book and this contribution? Take us back to where it started.
You start.
So, I will start by saying what I didn't say about my background is I was born in England, across the pond, as they say, and I was born to Jamaican parents. So my heritage is fully Caribbean, and so I grew up partially in England and partially in Montreal, Canada, and got to Rochester when I was about 11. And so one of the things about living somewhere where you're absent of family is that you have to make community. And so wherever my parents went, they made community. And so I grew up in a very strong Caribbean community and was embraced by that community. And as I got older and we started our own family, continued to embrace that community now. So I just wanted to say that. But when I was in Rochester, New York, when we lived there, I worked in government. So I worked in the Department of Recreation and Youth Services. And so a funny thing happened in about 2000, about 2001. Prior to that, we were doing rites of passage. We began doing rites of passage at our church. So, and around this time, our girls were, teenagers or what do they call the tweens, right? So we started doing rites of passage, and in 1997, and in early 2000, we got exposed to what it meant to do it in a cultural sense, right? Because you can have all the elements of rites of passage, but it's not necessarily cultural. And so we began doing that, and I worked for the city, and we were doing rites of passage with the city. And we were talking about how this came about earlier today, because there's the story, and then there's the backstory. So the backstory was, while I was working in the city, there was a group of my peers, coworkers who were Latino, who had a gala. Now, we had a black mayor, and there were enough of us in leadership and administrative roles. So, the question in my mind is, where's our gala? And so that the response was, well, they organized themselves, and, that's what they wanted to do. And I'm like, well, we need to organize ourselves. And until that time, we had not, right? And this is what happens a lot of times with us. We will wait till somebody else does something and then say, where's our stuff, right? So we said we wanted to do that and to have a gala, and we did. And that gala is still happening right now. So it's called the Black Heritage Gala. But about 2 years into this gala, we have a local newspaper that in January, every January, they would print a black edition. Right? So that's, you get your blackness in January. And so they printed this whole thing. It had all of the dates for significant activities for the black community, that they know of at the time. And this one year, they printed a list of African-American leaders, which I thought I was one, but I wasn't in that thing. So then I asked the question, right? How these people, right? Who identified these people? And I asked people, and nobody knew, so I reached out to the newspaper and asked, and they said, well, we asked our black staff. I said, okay, well, that's not how you do that, but thank you. And so then we started asking, well, this is who they said were the leaders. Who are our leaders? And
just really didn't have a lot of agreement about who our black leadership was. And just so I'm clear, I was asking specifically about our black women leaders. Who were they? And most people could not name 5, because that's what we were asking for, name 5. And so we decided at that moment that in addition to having a gala, we would convene black women and have a forum. It was called the Black Women's Leadership Forum, and we did that. And we started with a number of issues, but we wanted to narrow down. We didn't want to just know who our leaders were, but we wanted to know what our issues were. And the 3 issues that came out of that convening, we had a 3-part convening, but the 3 issues that came out were education, personal and professional development, and family development for black women. And so we did some research around family development, black family development. And at the time, this is 2005, at the time there were 2 curriculums in the entire country that we found that were targeted to black parents. One was in a rural community in Georgia, which really didn't fit, Rochester country, but it ain't rural. And the second curriculum was one that that fit our community, and the name of it was Effective Black Parenting. And when we say fit our communities, fit our issues, the issue that we were targeting was parenting training that included our history. So you can find a lot of parenting programs, but they don't include our history. They kind of just sort of gloss over that and act like it didn't happen. And so because of that, they weren't able to address some of the trauma in the black community. But we identified that curriculum, and we had them come to Rochester and train about 50 people altogether to deliver the curriculum. That's how we got started in doing parenting training. That was a long time, sorry.
And thank you for that, because I think that's very good backstory, and it just demonstrates this kind of like, okay, one thing led to another and led to another, and how you remain connected to purpose through this whole process, which is something that you emphasize in the book, so I just want to highlight that. And in terms of effective black parenting and how we got to strengths of the black family, can you speak to the differences between the two?
Absolutely. Well, I wanted to make sure we mentioned that.
Mike down.
Sorry. Can you hear me? Okay. Well, I want to make sure that I mention that CCC, who developed the curriculum that we had these persons trained on in Rochester, it was a good curriculum, but it was lacking something that, for lack of a better word, I would say it was lacking anything that touched or spoke to the spirit of our blackness. It had some good techniques, but as Eldris was talking about rites of passage and the elements of rites of passage, you can have elements of a parent program, but if it doesn't have our culture infused in it, it really doesn't speak to us. And that was what we noticed was lacking in that curriculum. And it wasn't a big thing to everybody, but for me, the fact that somebody outside of our culture developed it, that was important to me. And I knew if we were going to continue using it, that we were going to have to modify it to meet the needs of the community that we were working with. We infused history, pre-enslavement, enslavement period, and post-enslavement. We included those histories in our curriculum and talked about what strengths that our ancestors brought here and actually thrived with and used to survive, and how we continue to use them today. So that was the major difference in the two of the curriculums. And that's the reason that we felt like it had to be modified to fit our needs a little better. Yeah. You want to add something?
Yeah, I'll also add the effective Black parenting. There's two things in addition to what you mentioned. The effective Black parenting curriculum was also kind of deficit-based. So instead of focusing on strengths, it focused on here's what not to do, right? And we understand that there's trauma, but you know, don't do this. You know, you can do this, which is not a bad thing, but it didn't really speak to strengths. The other thing is we had a hard time getting past that title. How you making something about us and then gonna give us something, here's how you can be effective, because you're not effective now. And that's what people heard when we said that. So we changed the title like right away. And then strengthening the Black family, we would say strengthening the Black family using the effective Black parenting curriculum. Like that was in small letters. But strengthening the Black family resonated to folks. And over time, as we started including history and including what was cultural for us, it became something else. Like we were barely talking about what was in the curriculum, and what people were coming for and what was resonating with them were the cultural things that we were doing. And the cultural things that we were doing, we had been using them in rites of passage with our young people. And so many of the parents of the children that we were working with would come to the training. So it just turned it, one thing led to another, led to another. This is what it led to.
Yeah, thank you for that. One of the things I enjoyed most about just reading through all of the different elements in the book, you guys pull from different traditions in Africa to kind of inform the way things were before the Ma'afa, the transatlantic slave trade. And I'm curious, are there any anecdotal stories of how that sort of landed? I know that in this book you guys speak to doing youth work at your church, at our church, I'm acting like, at our church, and sort of encountering Elder Emily Gunther at a conference and being able to kind of glean from her the key portions of rites of passage that you were able to infuse into the work, and that it kind of grew into something from there. So I'm curious, that was the revelation for you, right? And that was the introduction for you. Are there any anecdotal stories about how this landed with the parents that you all work with over the years in terms of moving from this deficit-minded perspective on parenting to more so reconnecting with what was there before?
That was a deep question.
Could you repeat the question?
How did it land with parents? I mean, I'm thinking, I'm new to, I've obviously been through a rites of passage program, but for someone who is, let's say, completely new to this, how does it land with those folks, like these kind of, the revelation, like for example, right, I was watching Color Purple the other night, and Nettie was like, this is Africa. They say we come from here. The idea that there was a point in time where people didn't even know where we had come from wasn't even something that I had even thought of, that I didn't know that my people are from Africa. So similar to Nettie having that revelation, and a deeper level, you kind of connecting with the culture through rites of passage. That's what I'm asking.
Okay, so a little bit about my background. I decided in 2005 I didn't want to work for for this organization I was working for any longer. So I decided to go back to school and I decided I was going to teach African and African American history. So I went back to school and earned an MA in Africana Studies. And I decided I really wanted to teach Black history. And my love for actually teaching Black history is what led me to become deeply involved in African-centered rites of passage. Going forward from that point, it became important to me that everything I did was looked at through a sort of an Afrocentric lens. And when we started to build this rites of passage platform or initiative in Rochester, so to speak, we noticed that that element was lacking from a lot of the spaces that we were in. And we no longer wanted to be in spaces that were lacking that. Did I answer the question?
You can take a stab at it, too.
I'll take a stab. I think it's like what came first, the chicken or the egg? Mm-hmm. So most of what we get to with the book and the trainings that we did is how connected we still are to who we were. We just have been sort of misdirected a little bit. So especially if you grew up in a Black church, there were a lot of elements from our Africanness that ended up in the Black church, but they just don't call it that. And so Black parents connected with Proverbs. When we talked about our axiology or our value system and it being relationship-based, they really understood that. When we talk about fictive kinship and how your blood don't have to be your blood, right? So it can be auntie, who's not auntie at all, but still auntie, right? And all Black families have that. One thing that was amazing is to see or to understand, like, I'm going back home. My parents sent me down south, right? Like, you might be up here, but during the summertime, you might have went down south. When I was younger, we went to Jamaica, right? And I had this sense of being abandoned because it's like my parents, you had that, right?
That is the feeling.
Right. It's like my parents took us there and just dropped us off. And you're like, wait a minute, I know this is supposed to be my grandmother and all these, but I don't know these people. But you are left there with your kin. And you make it, not just I don't want to say make it work or make a way. You understand that you are from something larger, right? And so when we talk to Black parents about that experience, many of them in Rochester had that. First of all, Rochester is, there's, if anybody's familiar with the warmth of other suns. So on the East Coast, a lot of folks came up from Sanford, Florida, and ended up in Rochester, New York. There's a whole community from Sanford, Florida. And so many Black parents had this experience of that going back down south and then coming back up. And some of those experiences are in their church and still in their family. So what we were doing was really helping Black parents. What we are doing is helping Black parents connect to who they are anyway, right? And really understanding that these traditions, these ways of being, did not start in enslavement, right? They started on the continent. And so there was, once you explain that, first of all, we provided an opportunity or venue for Black parents to embrace that, right? Because when you are doing this work and I participated in a parenting program when my girls were little, and it was called, I can't remember exactly what it was called, but EPIC was the initial. So it had effective parenting something. But I went to this program, and I remember very clearly when it came to the section around discipline, I mentally checked out. I don't even know what the person was talking about. I can't even tell if it was a man or woman talking at that particular time, because I know that the way I disciplined my child, I wasn't going to discuss, number one, in company of white people, right? And it was something that I felt was sort of very sort of private. So it just didn't. And what I did in that moment, and this is what led me to doing this work, one of the things that led me, is I checked out to the point, I started doing my grocery list in my head. I was just like, okay, I need some eggs, and I was doing this whole thing. This dissonance, not to have this discussion. So a lot of black parents were coming to the training because they wanted other tools than the discipline tools that they had been using, which was, we don't got to say it right now, but y'all know what that was, right? So, and so black parents really embraced this and helped this to birth.
I wanted to add that.
Microphone.
Sorry.
It's on.
First, let me say, I'm 70, and sometimes I lose my train of thought mid-sentence, so bear with me. But
I'll help you.
one of the things that resonated with the parents was the history piece of it, because we delved into the history of ancient Kemet, Nile Valley civilizations, Western Sudanic civilizations, and we talked about things, not just that everybody came from kings and queens, but we talked about the foundational civilizations that Africans had built. And we talked about something that really resonated with the men and the young men, which was slave revolts. There were hundreds of revolts on the continent and mid-Atlantic that nobody talks about. And that resonated with people, and they were very interested to know that people survived that people were actually struggling and overcoming enslavement. That was one of the things. And another thing was that people really liked the idea of being able to have some social time. We had a meal. Well,
And you talked about as a extension of the black family.
grew up as the I grew up as the
Can y'all hear me now? They had met in Jamaica, but they met up again in England. They were part of the Windrush Generation. Do you all know about the Windrush Generation? No? So the Windrush, just really briefly, the Windrush Generation are when, after World War II, when England was just bombed out from Germany and from that war, they went to their colonies and recruited some of the folks from those countries to come to England to help it rebuild. And they're called the Windrush Generation because the name of the ship, the first ship that took them, was the name of it was Windrush. So they're called the Windrush Generation. But my parents were a part of that transition. And so when they went to Jamaica, to England, they found a community of like-minded folks, and that became their community. And all those people were my aunts and uncles. So you know when you have an auntie and an uncle, they can give you a little tap-tap in place of your own parents, right? So they filled in a lot of roles, and so they helped each other in terms of living accommodations and sharing of food, sharing of clothing, sharing of space, which is a significantly African tradition. Right? So, so we had that there. Same thing when we got to Montreal, Canada, found another Caribbean community. And so, you know, you have difference because you have those from Trinidad, those from Jamaica, those from the Bahamas, so and Barbados and so on. But you still have community. And so the same thing when we went to Rochester. As a matter of fact, in Rochester, there's a Caribbean community, and there's the Rochester West Indian Festival Organization. It was one my mother was one of the founders of. That's still going, and they do an annual event. But that fictive kinship was in every community that I went to, and it's here.
Thank you for that. I definitely, growing up in the Carafest world, was very exciting, number one, because we didn't have a lot of Jamaican family in Rochester. We kind of just had Nana, Grandpa, you, and your siblings. So our aunties and uncles were from Trinidad, Grenada, you know, Barbados. And we grew up just with like this kind of mashup of West Indian culture, which is just like our own unique Caribbean American experience that I really do appreciate. So I want to get into some of the like practical activities that you guys have in the book. So one of the things that I noticed on the maybe not very first, but one of the initial things you do with youth is to do a Who Am I reflection sheet. So it charges the youth to kind of do some investigating with their parents. Can you speak to why that is important as you get into this work with youth? Okay.
So I'm going to endeavor to speak loud, which means I'm going to have to move up a little bit. Okay. So the Who Am I reflection is something that we've done with rites of passage with young people, but we also do it with the parents.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really important to understand your name, like why you were named, why do you have the name that you have? And what we found was that there were a lot of adults who, you know, they have a name, they answer to that name, they've been answering their whole life, they know it's on a birth certificate, but they don't know what it means. And from an African perspective, every time you're called by your name, you are called that thing, right? So if it means the joy of life, every time your name is mentioned, someone, when they're calling you the joy of life, come here. Right? It's different than if you say, and I will use this, and I told this woman I was going to use this. I had a coworker, and she introduced me to her daughter, and her daughter's name was Alizé. Now she introduced me to her daughter, and she said her daughter's name, Alize, and I just did like this and looked at the mother.
Okay.
Right? And the daughter said, I know. This is what she said. She said, I hate my name.
Oh.
And she said, as soon as I get old enough, I'm going to change it. And
Mm.
I looked at the mother and I said, what's going on? She said, I don't. I like the way it sounds.
you can make it, yeah, you can make it your story. You guys talk about in the book. You talk about your experience in going to the continent of Africa for the first time, and it was so beautiful. I happen to have been there, yes, so I can't really. I couldn't even really put into words. I read about it in the book, and I was like, I was there, and it was like, whew, super duper amazing. I don't even know how you articulate how good that was. But I would like to know, how does that experience inform, affirm, and or impact this work? And just for folks in the audience who may not have there's some things you highlighted in particular about the experience in Ghana. So can you speak to that? Mm-hmm. Not all at once. I mean,
No, I'm just one particular.
yes. Okay.
So we went to Ghana. Thank you, Elder. We went to Ghana for my 63rd birthday. And you know, let me tell you, I'm going to tell you a beautiful thing that happened on the morning of my 63rd birthday. But have you ever been to, I would say, Cheesecake Factory, because it was a place for us, or Olive Garden, or one of them other places where you're having a birthday and the people come out, wait a minute, they come out, they say, happy birthday, da, 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 da. They bring a little piece of cake, da, 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 and when it stops, they all go like, and they're all gone. That was not my experience in Ghana. In Ghana, the hotel that we stayed at, we were eating breakfast, and we heard them in the back. Oh, if I tell you what, if you give me your email address, I'm gonna email it to you. Because we heard them in the back. We were like, oh, what's going on back there? And one by one, they came out. The whole kitchen staff, all the wait staff, everybody, and serenaded me. Not happy birthday. They were singing, come and see what the Lord has done. Come and see what the Lord has done. They were clapping. They brought pots and pans out. Listen. I almost want to get up and start dancing right now because that was so beautiful. And it went on for about like 5 minutes. All the people in the hotel, they got on their cameras. They were videotaping this thing. At first, you can tell I'm just excited by it, right? And that energy of it, I hope I'm giving that to y'all. Because the people of Ghana are like the most kindest and sweetest people that I have ever met. And so what we talk about was going home. Because it was, well, let me tell you why it's so significant. I only had like one birthday party when I was growing up. Because I lived in a place where it was always, my birthday is January 15th, same day as Martin Luther King. And every year, I don't care where I was living, there was a snowstorm on my birthday. So I had one birthday party. Like yours too?
She said in Rochester.
In Rochester. I got a whooping on that day too. I was acting up so bad, and that might be why I didn't have any more birthday parties, because I was acting up. But so to have an experience where you didn't have a whole lot of birthday celebration, and when once I got married and had my family, my husband always made sure I had a nice birthday. So I don't want to act like you didn't do nothing for me, because I know you did. But listen, when we were there, it meant the world to me to be embraced like that. And that was almost everywhere we went, we had that experience. And so that's what, that was a going home for me.
One of the things that you also talked about was the ancestor veneration that we kind of picked up on as we were just moving through all parts of Ghana. And there were almost billboards of ancestors. And months had passed. It could be 9, 10 months ago, and this billboard is up, or these posters are up throughout the community as a sort of memorial to ancestors, which is something that hadn't even conceptualized being here. You know, you do your service, you do your funeral, you keep the program from the funeral in a safe place.
Right.
You know, if you're like us, you might keep a lock of hair. I don't know if anybody else does that, but we keep, yeah. So, but that was our way. But then in Ghana, seeing that was honestly mind blowing and beautiful at the same time. But because it was just like, wow. And I can say coming into African spiritual concepts, and I know that, you know, we're largely Christian here, and then African spiritual concepts speak to ancestorship and the fact that this is a rights, a process in the rights, like a birthright, a marriage right, and then the ancestor right, right? And you guys speak to that in the book. So it was really, just adding my little tidbit, it was amazing to see that kind of in Ghana in like in real form. So yeah, anyway, lost track. If I could get a time check, that would be helpful too. 7:23. Okay. Can you speak to just the practical application of the book? So one of the things that you talk about maybe doing this in a group setting in the book. Let's say if you like have a group, or perhaps like you did it in a church group, how do families use this? Perhaps if they're not in that space, how do they kind of, you know, implement from here? Sure.
Well,
They can't hear.
there are several practical applications that the book talks about of ways to implement some of these things in your family. And none of them are really very difficult. As a matter of fact, as an example, the first one, knowing your name, is a simple exercise that asks some specific questions about your family, who your mother was, who your father was, who your grandmother was, who your grandfather was. And it also asks about what were your favorite things in school, what were some of the things that were important to you growing up. And that is connected to the communal piece. But also, we go as far as to offer an elder interview as well, for people to find the oldest person in their family and interview them and find out what their childhood was like, what was important to them growing up, what things were going on in the lives of people of African descent when they were young, what changes have they seen over the years, better or not so good. So those kind of things are very easy to apply. They're not really difficult. Also, there was a piece that we saved over from the original CCC curriculum, and that was, it's not really that technical, but when you say social learning theory, people think, oh, that sounds like, you know, might be difficult, but no, it's not. Actually, all it's talking about is we learn by seeing others do, being careful about who you expose your children to. And that includes family members, okay? You know, we love Uncle Jimmy, but he drinks a lot, you know? So that's important to understand that our children begin to solidify their place in the world by what they learn and what they see, and that people learn from seeing others do. We don't come here with a book in our pocket or instructions in our pocket of how to be in the world. Anything else? Well, she was asking about how they apply it. Anything else you want to add?
This, well, first, the book is written at a level so most parents can pick it up and read through the instructions and do the exercises. The first chapter is sort of centering culture, right? Cultural knowledge. The second chapter is centering cultural understanding. So we can know a thing, but doesn't mean that we understand it. So that's where it talks about the different rights, rights of birth, rights of adolescence, rights of marriage, right? And that is a right, right? And rights of eldership, right? And so we talk about that from an African perspective, but what are practical applications for that right now? And then we get into the black family development. So we talk a little bit about, what the traditional African families and some of the principles there. And then the black families during enslavement, and then black families post-enslavement, and trying to draw the thread of who we are through that so that we can see those things, the real application now. But the chapter that does the most for that is the fourth chapter, because in the fourth chapter is where you have to start building your family story. So every family has an overcoming story. Every family has an overcoming story. So it is the story that we pass down about grandma, right? Nana and grandpa, like how did they get here, right? And that's a success narrative that our children need to hear. And for a long period of time, we didn't talk about what happened, right? Because some of it was trauma. You know what else too? Some of it was trauma. But back in the day, if you ask an adult about their business, they tell you, what? You might get slapped in the mouth for that. So really, we're talking about what is the narrative that your children are hearing about their lineage, and how are you drawing success out of that? Because they need that overcoming story to be a part of their story. So it's where we're working, or the families are working to sort of identify, okay, well, this is my narrative, this is my story, and to build that narrative. So there are instructions on how to do it. And then from there, it goes on to, better communication, like what are the proverbs that you're going to be using with your family and so on. And then how to celebrate, right? The best way to use it is in a group. So if you're going to, the more the merrier, because we're community people, we're relationship. And so you really want, if you're going to work through this, that you have somebody that you're talking to about it. And yeah, the more the merrier, that you're comparing those, and that you're encouraging each other to kind of move through it. And sometimes we might know a certain thing, but it's back here, and by hearing other people talk about their experience, they say, oh, that's right, well, that happened. That did happen in my family. I did have that experience. And so bringing that out in a group is really powerful.
We don't quote data a lot. There's resources in the back of the book if you want to know where we got anything from as far as the research, the science of it. But one of the things that I do remember, a data point that sticks out for me, is that when youth know their family story, their resiliency is increased quite a bit. Those children who know who they are, where they came from, their story about their family, there's a lot of pride in that. And there's a lot of basis for young people to, feel good about themselves. The other thing I wanted to say was, I was thinking about what was so significant about being in Ghana for me, because they left me out of that part altogether. But
You was there?
but anyway, no, that's not what I'm talking about. But anyway, we moved to Maryland. One of the things I liked about being here, where we live at now, is that I see people doing everything that look like me. We didn't have that where I came from. The community was like 70-30. But the difference between seeing people that look like me here and seeing people of color in Ghana was that everybody in Ghana showed you respect if you had some white in your beard. Everybody was nice to me. And of course, I was walking with a cane too, so they were extra nice. People opened doors for me. They always let me get on everything first. You know, when they brought food out, I wasn't always first for food, was I?
Yeah.
No.
If they brought food out.
If they brought food out, yeah. But I mean, people were so nice. In other words, that ancestor veneration really sank in for me while I was there. And I really appreciated that. I had never felt like that before in America, that who I was mattered to anybody other than, you know, family members or people that I knew. So that was really good for me. I like that.
Elder
Yes.
veneration.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for speaking to that and for making sure you put that in there, because that's very important. Like that, I mean, just the experience was just like, I can't wait to go other places on the continent. So you spoke a little bit about the concept of the family narrative, and I just want to posit just something that my grandmother transitioned when I was only 7 years old, but I have this really like life-size, bigger than life perception of my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, based on the stories that I was told. And the narrative was always, you protect your own, right? And I remember my dad, he probably gonna be like, well, why are you gonna say this quote? Because he has tons of one-liners. I mean, tons, right? That are just like, when you're a child, when I was little, I didn't see the value in them. But when I got older, I would find myself saying the quotes over and over. And it would be like, that was a fact of life that I didn't realize until I got older. But one of the things that my dad would always say, and you take it how you want it, right? I don't care if your sister is fighting a one-armed dwarf, you better help her fight. And listen, that might not be, look, I can tell it's look in his face. He's like, why that one? But that was one of the, my grandma did not play around, right? And Fran, her name was Fran, is in me, but through those stories, right? So I'm not saying I'm going around starting battles with people, right? But I'm going to hold my ground. And that energy came from my grandmother. That was one of our family stories that, even though I was only 7, it stuck with me. So, yeah. She was that. And there's plenty of other stories to back that up. So one of the things that, you know, we as a community, we talked about a little bit about tap on the butt, getting a whooping and stuff like that. And that's kind of one of the things that we don't necessarily, it's a hot topic. It's a debated topic. And I know that we touch on it a little bit in this. So, and I know that, full transparency, I was a child that got spankings as a little girl. Yes. But I know that that is not where you guys stand today. So can you speak to that a little bit?
We don't agree on that.
We do.
Okay.
Wait.
We need to call a family meeting?
Well, I don't believe in corporal punishment.
And so he wasn't the whoop.
Not at all. Not at all.
So, you, okay. Go ahead, share it.
You share stories about, you know, some of the corporal punishment that you received. But when I think about mine, I'm traumatized. And I would never want to put that on any of my kids. You know, I mean, I just feel differently about that. I know you think that under certain circumstances that the whipping is okay.
No, I don't think.
Oh.
Okay, so we're on the same page. Okay, how did we get from where we were to present day? Because I knew Mike and Jack as the daughter. I don't know them as the granddaughter. The grandchildren don't get what we got.
Right.
So
And usually the grandkids don't, because you've learned something,
Okay.
right? And the other part of it is that, you can go on home, right? So, but I will tell you, as a child, and we were talking about this, as a child who had received beatings, a beating never deterred me from doing the thing that I got a whooping for. It made me think, what do I got to do so I don't get caught at this thing? That's what, right? But it didn't stop me from doing those things. So one, I understood them not to be effective when I was a child. But when I got older and was a young parent, I didn't have any other tool. So okay. I went from that to get the belt, the shoe, whatever it was. And I always felt, maybe not immediately, but I felt bad about it. I did feel bad about it. And I could even say that some of the stuff was discipline was warranted, but I'm not sure it was that. I remember the time I got you. I ain't gonna tell you that one. I ain't gonna tell you that. I ain't gonna tell that story right now.
I do remember one apology.
Well,
Okay.
One of the things we've learned over the years
To your
is
credit.
that there's a difference between punishment and discipline. You don't have to whip people or hit people to discipline them. And I firmly believe that our children are intelligent enough to understand when given specific instruction. And there, as my wife mentioned, we now have other tools that we can put in place of corporal punishment. I'm not talking about standing in the corner. I'm talking about tools that make sense. Like there's some kind of reward at the end of the day for a certain kind of behavior that we want to increase, and for behavior we want to decrease, maybe we remove something if that's the case. So there's other options. We have other tools now, and that's one of the strengths of what we talk about in the book, is that there are alternatives to beating our kids. And then when you attach the historical piece to it, and we look at things like this, and we understand that that was a control tool that the oppressors used against us, then it begins to make sense that maybe we want to stay away from that. Because we're teaching our kids about the oppression of the enslavement period, but we're taking their pants down and beating them. They're smart. They're going to make the connection to it, So that's a really touching point for some parents, but the bottom line is either you do or you don't. And from my perspective, if you do, you probably will come to understand that it's kind of a wasted effort, because you can only do that for so long. You ain't beating that 16-year-old. You're going to get a real surprise if you grab that 16, 17-year-old to apply some kind of punishment that's physical, So we have to adapt and find other tools as young people progress anyway.
Yeah, now that you mentioned that, one of the reasons that I really wanted to find something else to use is I had friends who had older daughters, and I know that my friends and their daughters had physical fights. Like, okay, we about to, and I know, first I know I would win, but I at a certain point, because this one right here, she goes some, but but at a certain point, like, they were both scared of me.
Yeah.
Right. That's fear. A little bit of fear is not a bad thing, but I didn't want to do that to the point that, okay, now they're 13 and 14 and we're squaring up, right? I could, when my friends were telling me this, they would say, oh, this is going to happen to you. I'm like, oh, it's not going to happen to me, because we are not doing that. And so I think that there is, I could see the trajectory, right? And really wanted to change that trajectory, change it to something that we could have conversations. and that we could discipline in other ways. And so when we were doing effective Black parenting using that curriculum, it had some tools in there that we introduced to parents, and they liked them. And so we kept some of that in this workbook. And have some of those communication strategies. There's one particular tool that I resonated with called effective praise. And one of the things, like, I thought the way I was praising my kids was, you know, that's the way you're supposed to do it, which was, you did a good job with that, but let me show you how to do it better, or something like that. And it really wasn't effective. It really wasn't effective. And it really wasn't, first with your older sister, Sasha, because she would do everything begrudgingly. And she would always leave something not done. And so we had the story we would tell about washing dishes, right? So if I say wash dishes, what am I saying? What do you say? No. If I say, Shamise, I'm going out. When I come back, better wash them dishes. The kitchen better be done. The kitchen better be done. And I would come home, and the dishes would be washed, but that would be it. And this is how I know it was on purpose. You know, when you're washing dishes and there's food in the sink, right? There'd be food in the sink. There'd be some suds on the counter. And so I would, first of all, I had this thing that if I came home from work and the kitchen wasn't clean, I wasn't cooking. And that worked for a little bit. It did work for a little bit, because Elder likes to cook at that time. He fooled me when we got in retirement, but he did like to cook back then. And I went and I learned about this tool, effective praise, and there's steps to it. So I said, okay, I'm gonna come on. Now she's not a teenager anymore. She's a young adult. She's living at home. And I'm walking up the steps, and I could look through my house and go through the hallway and look into the kitchen. I could see the kitchen counter. I see suds coming up, right? And she's standing there looking like, we gonna have it out right now. She was looking like she was gonna threaten me. And I came in, and I said, oh, thank you so much for washing the dishes. And I moved in close, and I touched her, and I smiled at her. And she was mesmerized. It was like I did magic. And you know what she said? I wrote this story up. You know what she said? Do you have anything else I need to do? Now, that can work one time on an ornery young woman, because she was ornery. She was. She's very pleasant now. Right. And I was sold, because I had been trying to force it. And just a little bit of love and understanding got me a whole lot. So when we're doing the training, that's one of the stories that I use, because you can use this strategy with your kids at almost to change behavior in for any circumstance. The thing about it is, you can't play around with it, because you have to be consistent. Right? So that's a.
The other piece of that is the praise has to be authentic. Yes. You can't praise for things that they know you're faking the funk with, you know. Oh, you close the door behind you, baby. Thank you so much. Nah, has to be authentic, because they see through it when it's not, you know. I thought I had something else to say.
Well, I do want to leave room for, can I get a time check, please? 7:48. Okay, so I think it's a good time. I do have one more question, and then I'm going to open it up to folks who might have questions in the audience. But we kind of rounded out the conversation speaking about adult children. And I know that there are some folks who are here who have adult children who might be thinking about, okay, how could I, is there a way to do this with older children? And obviously the nature of the relationship changes a bit, but can you speak a little bit to your experience with kind of using these tools with adult children? Yeah.
Well, I think cue to pick this up. If we're this workbook is for anyone to be able to pick it up and use it. If you don't have children, then it's a good way to plan, right, for what you are going to do. And again, this workbook is focused on talking about and lifting strengths, right? Because as we understand strengths, strengths lessen the impact of weaknesses. So if you're building strengths, those weaknesses become less and less. And so, so the book is written for sort of anyone to actually use, but it is not therapy. And no, because some people sometimes you got to work that out with somebody who's trained in doing that, and so we acknowledge that this isn't that. And the other thing is that this is a beginning for. This is not like you do this and you got parenting down pat, right? Or that you have the culture down pat. This is a very surface level beginning for folks who are looking to sort of better understand who they are. We always talk about, I'm an African, I'm connected to Africa, but if you don't know what that means, this is a good place to start. And the other thing that we sort of emphasize is like every group of people can attach themselves to a land of origin. That's what we mean when we talk about being African. So our origin, even though we've, sort of come through a lot of, in our lineage, a lot of different challenges, our origin is still that. And so we do list the books that we've used, anything that is not, that we didn't create. We identify the author, so we encourage buying additional books. This is a good place for that because a lot of the books that we have are on these shelves. And so so it's a good place if you're on the journey. I mentioned effective praise because it is one strategy that we have found that works with anybody. And the reason it works is because it's about making a connection and just bringing your humanity to that other individual, child or no, right? And so we also talk about the concept of Ubuntu, right? This connection that we are connected because we're human, right? And so I don't exist, or I cease to exist as human if I don't acknowledge your humanity, right? And so it's for adult to children, it's adult to adult, adolescent to adolescent. And it's something that we are on, in terms of our life's journey, we're always on this life's journey, right? We're never going to have it. And so there's never going to be a book that you're going to get that has it all, right? But this is just something to help parents on their journey.
Thank you for that. And I love that you highlighted the research, that you both highlighted the research that you did for the book and some additional reading that's available to folks that are, interested in going more in depth on some of the concepts that you've presented.
Addressing the question of how this impacts older children, I don't think we ever stop modeling and teaching as parents. It's lifelong, right? And there are things that we can model and teach no matter what the age is. Love and understanding, self-discipline, pride in blackness, good health and hygiene habits, good school skills and study habits. And when they see us doing these things, that's modeling for them. And that says a lot if they're still around you. I mean, you know, a lot of times we don't even estimate the impact that things we've done in front of youth have carried on and have been remembered. The other thing I wanted to say was that, man, I lost my train of thought. It'll come back to me in a minute.
That's all right.
Yeah.
That's all right.
Something I thought was important, but it's okay. I'll come back. Wait, it'll come back to me in a minute.
All right.
And when it comes back, just say, it's here.
Right.
I want to grab the mic and say, yeah. This is what I wanted to say. Yeah.
Like that.
I think Elders mentioned that the book scratches the surface, particularly the spirituality piece. One of the strengths of our people is their faith, or their belief in a creator, divine presence in the universe. That's sustained us throughout all of the trials and tribulations. And those things are, the spiritual aspect of it is immeasurable. And if you're a young parent starting out, I mean, when we got married, there wasn't any manual for people of African descent about raising their kids. That talked about the strengths of the African on this continent and throughout the diaspora. It just didn't exist then. So I think that, and when you look at it from that perspective, it's a great thing for people to be able to pick it up. And maybe this isn't everything you need. Maybe you need to look at the list of resources and read some of the stuff that we use to put the book together, you know? So that's what I wanted to say. Came back.
It came back. That's that 70-year-old brain. It's working.
Yeah, I do crosswords.
You do? All right. Shout out to puzzles. So with that, I want to open up to see if there's any questions from folks in the audience. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
Eldris and Elder, how are you? My question, you mentioned that parenting is essentially like a lifelong thing, right? Do you both feel like there was a point where you've mastered parenting, or are you still learning? Are there things that you're still learning even to this day?
You know, there's a point at which, you know, how young people go through states of development. There's that developmental stage where nothing you say rings true for your children. As they get older and begin to understand more and become more wise about the world, they begin to understand that some of the things you said were true. When it reaches that point in the relationship, the relationship just gets better, and we are learning, because I'm still learning, because I'm gonna say I have a temper, but I'm temperamental. I'm fussy. They say I'm cranky, right? But sometimes we have to practice more patience than others, no matter how old our children are, how mature they are. And it also changes when your child has children. That's a big turning point. When they begin to see, you know, how much work has to go into developing strong African American youth.
So one thing I would share is, from a cultural perspective.
Okay, I'm going to hold on to this. From a cultural perspective, the way we live here is not sort of connected to our foundation. So we really, on the continent, you would find more intergenerational families. And so one thing that we came down here and decided that we were going to do intergenerational, and we bought a house together. And we're so I'm relearning my daughter, because she was down here for a long time when we were up there, and so I'm finding that for a while we were empty nesters. I'm savoring that, because it is a beautiful time when, you know, you don't have to worry about anybody else, right? You just like, I'm out, right? But it's a beautiful thing, and everybody should experience a little bit of it, right? But really, we're supposed to be intergenerational, and so we made an intentional move to be down here. And so I'm more tolerant as I get older. So you know you can be more tolerant with grandchildren, but I'm also more tolerant with our kids. And because I'm not parenting in that sense, I can reflect on who I was as a young woman. Some of the stuff I did and shouldn't have done. You know, I can hold space for your adultness, right? For the woman that you are and that you are still becoming. So I think that is how I'm choosing to show up and to parent right now, right? And to model that.
Yeah, somebody say Ashe. I'm going to go right here. Oh, he has a mic behind you. And then we'll go to the young lady in the black t-shirt.
Okay, so thank you all for this book, this workbook. I'm going to ask the question from an educator, from the perspective of the educator. So I'm in middle school, and you mentioned that this book could be used for anybody. So my mind is always going, how can I use this with my students? How can I use this? And I like the activity of who am I, right? The position that I serve, a lot of times the students, the ones that come to me a lot are the ones that are rough around the edges. You know, they are, you know, always getting kicked out of class. But I don't have those same issues with the students, right? I like developing the relationship with the child. And so my relationship with them, they're fine because I'm getting to know them, I'm learning them, and I see them differently than sometimes what the teacher may see them, right? So I'm looking forward to doing that activity with my students and getting to know them on a deeper level to help them also understand themselves. But how do I connect this with the parents? Because sometimes when you talk to parents, they kind of put themselves in a position where they don't want to be told anything about their child. And it's not that I'm trying to tell you that what you're doing is wrong. I just may have a strategy that can support this child in the way that I've been working with this child. But so how do I bridge that gap between that parent and helping them understand that first of all, we're working together. It's a partnership. And introduce this book or some of the activities and not say, you're doing a bad job, because that's not what I want to say. I just want to say, hey, I know something that could work. So what could I do to bridge that gap?
That's a really good question.
I'm just thinking about some of the parents that I've dealt with over the years. Thank you. Some of the parents I've dealt with over the years, and in some cases, that parent would have to have been drowned before they asked me to help. You know how you have to wait till a drowning man's going down for the last time before you pull him out? But I think that developing relationships, strong relationships with parents is key. Rather than wait for the situation or the behavior of the child to be drowning, maybe try to introduce some things that may stop from getting to that point. And you know your parents, you have to feel them out. Some, excuse me, some will be open to help and others won't. You know, we changed the name of this from effective to the strengths of the black family. We point out to parents some of the strengths they have inherently that they aren't looking at, you know. That would be my suggestion. But again, all parents are different. And building a relationship on any basis you can find to build a relationship with parents is always a good thing. Sure.
Right. I think that's wise, and some of, like, one of the strategies that I've used. So again, some of this pulls out some of the rites of passage work that we've done. So if you pull on some of those activities, one way to actually get the parent involved is to make a copy of the sheet and say, here's what we're working on. And you might hear some of this language, or they might ask you a question. So I just want you to know what we're working on. So at that point, you're really engaging the parent as a partner, right? And the way we always talked about this, we're not teaching you how to be a parent, right? we want to partner with you in your goals for your child. So how can we help you, right? And so the way that you approach it is really, really critical, and to approach it that I'm your partner in this, and this is what is going. And you know, the other thing that Elder mentioned was, I remember, I don't know if it's, I think it was you, the teacher, that when the first time that Jasmine went to a school with a black teacher, the teacher reached out to us, you know, at the beginning of school to say, here, you know, this is who I am, I'm gonna have your child in school, and we had never experienced that before. So her name was Miss Phillips.
Miss Phillips.
I love me some Miss Phillips.
Miss Phillips.
So Jasmine could not come home. You know, Jasmine was good for, they doing this to me at school. And she could not come home and tell me nothing about Miss Phillips. Who you talking about? Miss Phillips, you better get out of here. Okay?
Couldn't do no wrong.
No, Miss Phillips couldn't do no wrong. And she established with me before there was any issue that she was my partner in that. So that was so long ago that I remember her name. As a matter of fact, when we would go into schools and we were doing this in schools, I talked about Miss Phillips in one of the classes, and her daughter was the teacher. She said, I want to come and tell you that, Miss Phillips, I'm her daughter. And I was like, I love your mama. Where your mama at right now? But you're developing. You're not saying, here, you need parenting training. You're saying, I'm working with your child, and this is what I'm working on.
So one of the things, I just want to add a little bit here. One of the things that we recognize working with youth was that young men and young women need specific development, manhood development and womanhood development. And once you step into that arena, and then you begin to recognize that if we're going to have the biggest impact on families, it's not going to be through the children, it's going to be through the parents. Because they should be in control and running the households, actually. But those are some of the things that we've learned after doing this for a long time.
And I also want to add one of the things that you talked about. I'm going to go to the young lady right here, but you talked about when you're engaging parents and doing kind of the training, that you make it accommodating. So you schedule it, and this is just really practical stuff. You pick a time of day that works for most parents. You provide a meal, so you take care of what would be normally happening in dinner time, and you also have like a constructive activity for the children to be doing in a separate space, so that the parents can feel poured into as they're kind of going through this process. So
If it's a group training.
if it's a group training,
Right.
yes.
Good evening. I'm Maya Cunningham. Thank you. I just want to say first, thank you, Elder Eldris Jackie, Elder Michael, for what you're doing. I came late, so you may have covered what I'm going to ask. One thing I want to say is that I just feel, I haven't looked at the book, but I could feel it is constructive and building. And that really runs against, for a long time, now I'm with the same generation as a professor at university, but I also was in the K-5 classroom with the same generation long ago, and so that I'm working with now in the university setting. And one thing I noticed is that the narrative, it was even unspoken, was to our black children, we're gonna uplift you even if it means that you have to reject your family, right? That's the narrative, is, you know, particularly in high poverty areas, where the family is seen as pathological. The family is seen as the destroyer of the child, that the child is going to school to be uplifted away. And though that is never articulated, that attitude permeates the environment of the school, or the environment of the after-school program. And so this is the complete opposite of that. We're building on and drawing strengths from any family. And so I think that is obviously so nation building for us. One thing I wanted to say to the teacher question, I had the blessing of being able to live in Botswana and study the way, I was actually looking at the way traditional music is used to teach children cultural and national identity there. But having being in the schools, the school was a family environment, and the teacher was of the same culture as the child, obviously, and was seen as an extended parent. That partnership was a tacit, unspoken, maybe spoken, but an assumed thing. And I think that that's something that, so that leads me to my next question. That we can see that kind of happening in schools where there's a mostly black environment, mostly black teaching staff, maybe. But 80% of the teachers in the United States are white. So what do we do with that? That's question number one. And then two, I'd love to hear more about the work that you all have done in classrooms. And then finally, any thoughts about the way the black family does seem to be under threat by different kinds of colonial agendas, and I will let you all kind of speak to that.
First question is about white teachers, and how do we reconcile that, like with this kind of work? Dang, I'm sorry. The second one was y'all's work in the classrooms.
And the black family under threat
Yes.
by colonial agendas.
Yep, yep. Okay,
Lots to unpack.
lots, okay.
And I know y'all have strong opinions.
The first question, what was the first question? White teachers.
80% of the teachers are white.
And not only are they white, but they're female as well. You know, I might get some pushback from this response, but I'm just going to be frank about it. The first teacher is the parents. And if you ain't doing nothing with your kids at home, they're going to absorb anything that hits them. So one of the things we have to talk about with our children is their resiliency to racist structure. And our children, this is the youngest of all of ours. So as you can see, when she was in grammar school, the way that they approached our young people, it was kind of obvious. It wasn't as masked as it is today. Well, I guess no black history is not really masking anything either, is it? But she had a teacher, right? Miss, man, I can't remember her name. Not Ginther. I'm sorry. Miss Cecila, yeah, who told her she couldn't, this is a Catholic school we were paying for her to go to. And I mean, we were paying a lot of money for her to go to. And she told our daughter she couldn't pray with her hands like this. They had to be like this. And she made a big deal out of it, to the extent that we end up having to sit through a parent conference with her. This is the same teacher who also told her that she was lying when she said she had Native American ancestry, because she had a story about ancestors of ours that were Native American. And these are the kind of battles back and forth. But if we weren't talking to her about what was going on, if we hadn't taught her about her ancestry and she didn't know who she was, it would have been much more difficult for her and us as a family to overcome that. So that's why I say I think the first teacher is the family. And communication, finding out, knowing what's going on with your child in school. Go sit in the classroom. You have a right to. Go sit in there and listen and see what's going on. You have a right to do that, you know. Public school ain't free. We paying for it with our taxes.
I would also add that there are white teachers who understand what this is, right? They know that they don't know. And you can approach them from that perspective because they don't know this. Like many times you would approach someone and they will say, well, you know, I grew up poor. That's not what we're talking about. Right. So sort of having some facts and having some of the information is how you sort of back folks up. But the part of the challenge is also that although we don't make the majority, that there are a lot of us who are in schools that don't know. And really what we have to do is to strengthen what we know as a group, right? Because our strength is in community, it's not in the individual. The individual is not going to be able to take on the system. It has to be through community. So how many of your colleagues know and understand? How many of your colleagues, we used to have Sankofa circles, with educators. And there was a teacher resource center in Rochester that brought in Dr. Asante. Every year he came. And so not just teachers got the benefit of that. Community got the benefit of that. They invited parents in. Dr. Joy DeGroot came regularly, right? So you have an opportunity to build cultural knowledge in community and sort of expand that. And so you have to create strength to lessen the impact of weaknesses, right? So that was the one question. Hang on, we're gonna come to you because she had two more.
Black family under threat.
Yeah.
From colonial agendas.
Black family under threat from colonial agendas. Our
Neo-colonial.
right. Our only salvation will be together. Part of the problem is that we've sort of been socialized and absorbed this notion or this perspective of being the individual, right? So everything that we do is as an individual, and oftentimes what happens is because of poverty, you might have one individual in the family that has had some success, and so then that person, right, becomes sort of like the adult in the family. And is actually leaned on. Well, so who helps that person, right? And it has to be community. So what are we doing on purpose to really create community where we live and with folks that we know, right? So you have to create that in order to, buffer out some of the other things. I was, last week, I volunteered at a Goji training camp in Baltimore, and I was one of 2 resident elders there. Let me tell you something. These girls, I was with the girls, Goji girls, right? But they all came in. Not a one of them had processed hair. Now, I remember a time when everybody had processed hair. If you look on, in terms of what's playing on TV now, you can find programs targeted to black children from Africa, from here. The other day, we was watching the Wakanda cartoon. Now, when we were coming up, there was no such thing. So things are changing, and there are more resources now than existed ever before. So to counter, how you counter that is in community and building knowledge. And if we cannot, sometimes you got to take Boo-Boo and them by the hand. Y'all know who Boo-Boo and them is, or who the other people they say? Baby and her children. Pookie and them, right? Pookie and them. You got to figure who in my family can get with this, right? And start to build from where you are and build community. Because we're not going to survive any other way. First of all, they got the systems all. Our system is village. We need to get back to that.
We have the young lady with the hoop earrings right here in the 3rd row. Oh, I'm sorry. He did have the mic, and then we'll go back here. Thank you.
Well, my question's probably not going to be as great as the other ones you had.
Speak louder.
But
that's what they was telling us.
Yeah,
Speak louder.
I'm sorry.
I'm just messing with you.
I'm a father of a 19-year-old, and what resonated to me was when he said that the things that you taught your children, when they think back and say, "Oh, my dad said this," that's when you did something right, I guess. So I'm looking forward to that. But my question to you is, with your book, first of all, I wish I had it when she was coming up, but seeing you 2 together as a unit versus raising her as a single father and a single mother dynamic, could you compare and contrast the way that you guys did it as a unit versus single parents?
Get started here. We can do that with our own relationship because I grew up in a family with a mother and father. And so I always honor my my parents and my heritage. But I brought to our relationship the history of stability in marriage, right? And so there was a lot that we were able to lean on from that. So we have a couple that's been married just a little longer than us, right? What I know that you both know is that it's not easy. It is not easy. But if you have examples before you, you're able to actually do that. Now, it didn't hurt that I love me some him. You know, didn't hurt that I love me him, right? And that we are partners in our work. So we found each other, and our missions found each other, even without that. Even without that. So it's possible to do that. But if we were not aligned in mission, we'd have been, he'd have been his way and I'd have been my way. So there's some importance of aligning mission, and what our children have seen is the fruits of that aligned mission.
Was there a question?
There was a question.
There was.
He wants us to contrast.
Oh, a single parent family versus.
This is, y'all, if you be together for a long time, this is what y'all have to look forward to. Somebody got to step up and help. Right?
Contrary to popular belief, there's a lot of positive activity in single parent families. There is stability there. There is history there. And I had a lot of men around me. I had uncles. I had my mother's friends. So I think the only real difference was that my mother got to make all her decisions by herself. And some of them decisions I wouldn't have agreed with. Okay? My childhood was, the only reason my childhood was had less consistency because we was poor. So we moved a lot. We moved a lot. Sometimes the lights got cut off. Sometimes we went to the food bank, and that was the only real obstacle that we had as far as our family unit, because my grandmother lived with us until I was 14 years old. And any other number of aunts and uncles lived with us during my childhood. So there were always family members there to fill in the gap, whether it was financial or providing other things in the household, cooking, cleaning, repairing things. So we always had a lot of family around. But Jackie and I, what we have is we had a good compromise because I really loved her father. He was really close to me, and I learned more about being a man in the time I knew him than I knew before I met him. And we got married when I was 28, and he died in 2018? He died in 2018. So, and I say that lovingly, that I learned a lot from my father-in-law, and when I married her, I thought he was going to be the enemy, He was the adversary trying to run my life, through my wife. Who'd think he was? But we became good friends, and I think one of the reasons for that was I understood that boys needed to learn how to be men. It's important that boys understand what manhood means before they get married, before they start making babies, and that was something I failed at, because I had 4 children when I met my wife, and I wasn't married to any of their mothers. You know, I mean, we have real good relationships now, but, you know, things were, you know, and we had some turmoil. There were some obstacles to overcome. But single-parent family versus single family, you know, some of the values that you get and having, I mean, the value of having another person to bounce things off of, I can always say, that's what your mother said, you know. And she could always say, that's what your daddy said, you know. So yeah, that's at least one advantage, right? But, you know, two is always better than one, obviously, especially two incomes. Because I can tell you, I was poor. I didn't like being poor. You know, being poor wasn't that much fun. But what I did learn from my mother was a hard work ethic. She went to work from the sun up, how do they say, king to king, sun up to sundown. You know, she went to work every day. That's what was modeled for me. So I took away some good values from my family.
And I had a really, really
Good relationship with my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law was she was one of a kind, right? And I loved her, and she loved me.
Very sweet, very sweet.
Hi, good evening. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I just came across it after work, and I said, I need to go and, you know, listen and hear. And I'm so grateful for all of the gems you dropped to the Campbells, and it's a testament that your daughter is interviewing you. So it just goes to show that you guys did and are still doing something right. I wanted to ask about the rites of passage, your thoughts on it. I actually experienced it for myself in my mid-40s. One of my big takeaways is not only the group or the cohort that I, you know, did my rites of passage with, so we kind of hold each other up. And I wonder about those who would have done it at a younger age, if they even really can mentally affirm what they think they are going through to appreciate it at such a young age. Because at one point I was like, oh, wait, I missed this at a young age, which is what made me say, okay, I need to do this. But kind of juxtaposing it, I'm like, no, I think I mentally, maybe if I was early 30s, but so curious your thoughts on rites of passage for young folk and how you are explaining it in the book. And if you think if we need to do it slightly different, make it a little bit for when they are a bit older. And then my other question is, any gender parenting roles that may actually need to be reconstructed? I know, like we say, men take the trash out, but you know, or I think I love what you just said. He fooled you. So he was cooking in the beginning.
and he likes to cook.
Okay, so I was just curious if from a parenting, I think we hold it so liable for some of the mother and father to be like, you have to do the hair, you know, not to say that, but you know, I'm just curious if what you guys came about or thoughts.
Regarding rites of passage, I truly believe it's lifelong. We're learning from the time we come here until the time we leave here. And I think it's an important process for young people or even adults. It's helpful, it's useful. I'm part of an advisory group for Baltimore Rites of Passage Initiative, and we're working with men and with boys. The issue of whether or not young people, youth, understand what they're going through, sometimes we're not doing evaluations on whether or not the young people understand what they're going through. We're basing evaluations on what are they getting from the men that are around them. What are we putting in front of them for them to absorb? And those are the things that are focused on during rites of passage programs for youth. attention to detail about how we're interacting with young people, making sure that we're modeling Iwe Pele for our youth, and helping them understand how to lean on each other and how to build male-to-male relationships, positive male relationships, helping them understand positive male-female relationships. And these things are ongoing. The youth are brought back a second time. They go through once during the summer and once again in the fall. And they can come back every year. Matter of fact, we welcome them back every year. So it's, the learning for the youth is exponential. And that doesn't end when that cohort ends, or they cross over in a sense. There's another question embedded in that. I can't remember what that was.
I just wanted to address that. The rights. So you actually responded to the question about whether or not it's appropriate. And the thing about it is, it's always appropriate because it's age appropriate. So what you received as an adult going through rites of passage is not the same that a young person would get. It's got to be appropriate to their developmental stage. And so yes, so I've been through a few rites of passage, right? And you probably would experience an additional rites of passage. You see what I'm saying? But when you get to I'm at a different season than I was when I first went through something, right? So as you develop and sort of get more, you will seek additional information that meets you where you're going, right, and can help you get to the next level, right? And so your cohort that you're with right now, your rites of passage cohort that you're with right now, might meet you and stand with you until you get to that next level, right? And then you might need something else to take you over there. With respect to gender roles, one of our strengths, one of the cultural strengths of black families is the adaptability of roles. So I was talking about this earlier. When my mother worked at night, she was a nurse and she worked overnight, and on occasion, my father had to do my hair to go to school. Right. Here go my ponytail. Now, I didn't say to him, "You can't do my hair, don't do my hair." I better not have said that. And he did what he could. He also, when we were little, he wasn't the cook that my mother was. But if my mother had to work or she had to do something or had another obligation, he got them pots moving. Right. So, because it wasn't, and he put us to bed, he did all the things. Now, my mother wasn't so great in some of the other things, but that's why he had sons, right? And sometimes the son, let me tell you what I learned how to do. I learned how to do some stuff that my brothers was doing, right? Because my father did not expect that I was going to have a man around there to do that for me all the time, right? So we are a people that adapt to what is needed, right? And that's a cultural strength that we need to continue to build.
Thank you for that question, because I know that there's a lot of gender discussions in Black online spaces now, and it's like, no, we have permission to color outside the lines, guys. So there's that. And with that, if there's no other questions, thank you all so much for coming and for being in space with us tonight. I want to thank you to my parents for being who you are. Yeah. Yes. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. So the workbooks are available for purchase here at Sankofa. So just FYI. And someone's going to make some remarks on that?
Yes. Thank you again for being here, family, one more time. So the books are available for purchase at the front. And we're going to start the book signing right now. So if you already have your book, you can come up right now. If you do not, please come by it at the front of the store. Thank you. And then come back.